Hello friends, today I am going to discuss about glycogen metabolism and its disorders. Now this topic it is a bit long, so I have divided the class into two parts. The second video will be available as glycogen metabolism part 2. Okay, so let's begin. Now before we go into the discussion about the metabolism of glycogen, I would like to have a brief recap about what is glycogen and also about the structure of glycogen. Now, glycogen, it is a storage form of carbohydrate. Now, our body requires energy, and most of our energy is derived from the oxidation of carbohydrates, mainly that is glucose. Now, whenever we have excess supply of glucose in our body, it is stored in the form of glycogen so that the glycogen can be broken down in the time of need and provide us with the energy we need. So this glycogen, it is the first line of defense during periods of fasting. If you remember that when we did the topic on gluconeogenesis, I showed you a graph showing where the glucose comes from in duration according to the periods after the meal. So initially for the first few hours after our meal, a glucose is derived from the glucose which is absorbed from our meal. After that, glycogenolysis takes over. Glycogen is broken down to provide us with our glucose. Simultaneously, gluconeogenesis also starts. So the amount of glycogen which is stored in our body, it is sufficient to provide the energy requirements for around 24 hours. Now, after that, in case of prolonged fasting, it is gluconeogenesis which provides us with the glucose. But in the time in between, it is glycogen which is broken down. Chemically, what is glycogen? It is a homopolysaccharide of glucose. It contains a numerous number of glucose molecules, and the thing with glycogen is that it has no fixed number of glucose units. We can add any number of glucose units we need. So whenever excess glucose is there in the body, it is stored in the form of glycogen. Okay, and when it is required, it is broken down. So there is no fixed number of glucose units which can be stored. It is present in the liver and muscle, and within the cells it is stored in the form of cytoplasmic granules. Now, why do we store glucose in the form of glycogen? Why do we not store glucose molecules as such? This is because glucose is osmotically active. Now, storing glucose in the form of glycogen maintains the osmotic balance of the cell. We want to store a large amount of glucose, and glucose is osmotically active. So if we used to store all of those glucose molecules as such, then it would lead to a tremendous increase in the osmotic pressure of the cell and the cell would burst. On the other hand, if we store the glucose in the form of glycogen, we are storing it in the form of a single molecule. So the osmotic pressure of the cell will be maintained. Next, coming to the structure, if you remember when you read the carbohydrate chemistry, this is the structure of glycogen. If you can see here, it is a highly branched structure, and this is what we call a dendritic appearance. So in the center here, we have a glycogenin molecule which acts as the primer for the whole of the synthesis. After this, we have all of these branches. So if you can see, we have one branch, then another branch, then another branch. So it is a highly branched structure, and these branches contain glucose units, and the glucose units are linked by glycosidic bonds. So it has a highly branched dendritic appearance. The straight chains are linked by alpha 1 4 glycosidic bonds. The branches are linked by alpha 1 6 glycosidic bonds. The core protein is glycogenin, and the straight chain is linked to glycogenin through tyrosine. Now, remembering these bonds, that the straight chain is linked by alpha 1 4 glycosidic bonds and the branches are linked by alpha 1 6 glycosidic bonds, it is very important to remember this concept, because when we do the synthesis and breakdown of glycogen, you will see that here different enzymes are required. Because enzymes are very specific in their action, so having a different bond means a different enzyme will be required for their synthesis and breakdown. So remembering these bonds and the position of these bonds in glycogen is very, very important. Now here we have a representation of glucose molecule. Again, the numbering of the carbons in the glucose is very important. So look here, we have carbon number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Now why are we doing it now? Because we want to see the position of the bonds. So if you see here, we have one glucose unit and another glucose unit. So if these two are linked by a 1,4 bond, it will lead to the formation of a straight chain because it is the apex of one molecule and the apex of the other molecule. So these linked together form a straight chain. Again, if we have another glucose unit and another 1,4 bond, it will lead to elongation of the straight chain of glycogen. But on the other hand, if we link another glucose molecule with it through carbon number 6, it is leading to the formation of a branch point. So here we have a straight chain, but when it is linked through carbon number 6, it gives a step-like appearance, or this is where the branch originates. Again, we will be adding another glucose unit through a 1,4 bond. So when the branch is elongated, the elongation of the branch is through 1,4 bonds. So remember that the glycosidic bond in case of the straight chain is 1,4 glycosidic bonds. The bond at the branch point only is a 1,6 bond. Again, when the branch is elongated, it will be 1,4 bonds again. So here it is another branch point arising. Now, glycogen is stored in the body. Now, where are the glycogen stores available? Number 1 in the liver and number 2 in the muscle. So, whatever glycogen is stored in the body, it is stored either in the liver or in the muscle. What is the function of this liver glycogen and muscle glycogen? The hepatic glycogen, it is responsible for the maintenance of the blood glucose levels. Whereas the muscle glycogen, it is responsible for provision of the muscle with energy. Now, glucose levels have to be maintained in a normal range. We discussed about this in the topic of gluconeogenesis. So the liver is responsible for providing the glycogen which maintains the levels of blood glucose in the normal range. Muscle glycogen, in the other hand, is required during active contraction of the muscle. Large amount of energy is required during muscle contraction. When all the glucose has been used up through glycolysis, then muscle glycogen is broken down, and that provides the glucose for the muscle to break down further on. So this muscle glycogen does not contribute much to the blood levels of glucose. Next, coming to glycogen metabolism. Now, when we are talking about glycogen metabolism, we include both the synthesis and breakdown of glycogen. So we are going to do both of them one by one. Now, glycogen, as we discussed, it is a homopolysaccharide of glucose. So if glucose is joined together, we can build up glycogen. And if glycogen is broken down, we can release glucose. So this is what happens, that when glucose units are joined together, through the process of glycogenesis, we get glycogen. So glycogen, it is a homopolysaccharide of glucose. Whenever excess amount of glucose is present, then the molecules are joined together through the process of glycogenesis and we get glycogen. And when glucose is required, then the stored glycogen is broken down. The process is called glycogenolysis and free glucose is released. So first we will talk about glycogenesis. So glycogenesis, it is the synthesis of glycogen. It is a cytosolic process. For this process, glucose first has to be activated to UDP glucose. Like though glycogen is built up of glucose units, the glucose units cannot just be added directly one by one to give glycogen. Glucose has to be converted to a high energy form, which is UDP glucose, before it can participate in glycogenesis. It requires energy in the form of ATP or UTP. Now coming to the steps. So broadly, when we are discussing about the steps of glycogenesis, it can be divided into three parts. First is the activation of glucose. As we said, that glucose has to be converted to UDP glucose. Then there is chain elongation. The main chain is elongated through the formation of alpha 1,4 glycosidic bonds. And this elongation starts from a glycogen primer. And then we have branch formation. Now, previously, what did we see? That the branch formation is through the formation of an alpha-1,6 glycosidic linkage. And so it will have a separate enzyme than what is required for chain elongation. Now, coming to the parts one by one. First, we will begin with glucose activation. So, what is the process reactions taking place in glucose activation? Reaction number one, glucose is phosphorylated by glucokinase, converting it to glucose 6-phosphate using one molecule of ATP. So this reaction is the same reaction which was taking place in glycolysis. That is the first reaction where we were using hexokinase. Here we are using glucokinase. So glucose in the presence of glucokinase is converted to glucose 6-phosphate, spending one molecule of ATP. Reaction number two. The shift of the phosphate group in the presence of the enzyme phosphoglucomutase giving glucose 1-phosphate. So previously we had glucose 6-phosphate. Now the position of the phosphate is changed from position number 6 to position number 1. So now we have glucose 1-phosphate. And reaction number 3, that is the main reaction, which is activation of glucose 1-phosphate to UDP glucose using glucose pyrophosphorylase enzyme and utilizing one molecule of UTP. So here you see, this is a picture representation of activated glucose. So this is glucose and which has been attached to UDP, which is a high energy molecule. And where does this UDP come from? It comes from one molecule of UTP. Next, coming to the chain elongation. Now, how does the elongation take place? For this, we require what we call a glycogen primer. Now, what is this glycogen primer? It is just a fragment of glycogen molecule. Now, as we said previously, the glycogen does not contain any fixed number of glucose units. It can contain n number of glucose units. If more glucose units are added, it is glycogen. If it is partly broken down, it is still glycogen. It does not have any fixed number of glucose units. Now, suppose we have a fragment of glycogen containing n glucose units. To this, we are adding UDP glucose. UDP glucose comes in, and in the presence of glycogen synthase, this UDP glucose, that is activated glucose, gives up its glucose unit. This happens in the presence of the enzyme glycogen synthase. And what we are getting is, again we are getting a glycogen molecule, but here the number of glucose units is n plus 1. So previously we had n glucose units, and now we are adding 1 glucose unit. So we again have a glycogen molecule containing 1 more unit of glucose. So in this way, in the presence of glycogen synthase, more and more glucose units can be added. So how does the reaction take place? The UDP glucose donates the glucose residue to an existing glucosyl chain, which is called the primer. So that is just a fragment of glycogen. This primer is elongated by the addition of glucose residues by glycogen synthase. So UDP glucose donates the residue, but this residue is added in the presence of the enzyme glycogen synthase. And what does this glycogen synthase do? It transfers glucose from UDP glucose to the non-reducing end of glycogen, or to the end of the glycogen primer. Finally, the UDP which was released is reconverted to UTP in the presence of the enzyme nucleoside diphosphate kinase using 1 ATP. So if you look at the reaction again, this is a pictorial presentation. Now initially we had a glycogen primer. The enzyme is glycogen synthase. UDP glucose comes in, that is activated glucose. It donates its glucose fragment, and glycogen synthase links this glucose fragment to the glycogen primer through the formation of a 1,4 glycosidic linkage. Similarly, more and more units of UDP glucose will be coming in, donating more glucose and linking it again by the formation of sequential 1,4 glycosidic bonds. So here, every time a UDP glucose is coming in, it donates its glucose a 1,4 bondless form. Again another glucose, another 1,4 bond form. This way it can contain it contains and gradually it elongates the chain. This is why we call it chain elongation. What happens to the UDP? This glucose has been donated to the chain. UDP, which remains, this is then converted again into UTP in the presence of the enzyme nucleoside diphosphate kinase. Okay, so here we have this UDP. It combines with one molecule of ATP, and this is converted to UTP plus ADP. So in this way, the UTP is regenerated. Why do we need the UTP to be regenerated? Because in the step in which we were activating glucose, we were converting it to UDP glucose, we required UTP there. So the UTP which is regenerated, again it is used to activate another molecule of glucose. So if you see the reactions here, so here we are starting from glucose. This side of reactions, it represents glycogen synthesis. So glucose, first in the presence of glucokinase, it is converted to glucose 6-phosphate. Then in the presence of phosphoglucomutase, it is converted to glucose 1-phosphate. Okay. Now this glucose 1-phosphate, it is activated to UDP glucose. The enzyme here is UDP glucose pyrophosphorylase, and the UDP here, it is coming from UTP. So here we are utilizing one UTP, which is giving PPI and UDP glucose. So now it is this UDP glucose which will donate the glucose unit to the glycogen primer to the formation of 1,4-glycosidic bonds. And the enzyme here is glycogen synthase. Now, one important thing here is that here, once the UTP is utilized, what we are getting is UTP glucose and PPI. And so this PPI, it is hydrolyzed further, and this ensures the forward direction of the reaction. And this is in the presence of pyrophosphatase. And here, once the glucose is donated to the glycogen primer, what we are getting, the glycogen unit is being elongated and UDP is being released here. So this UDP comes back, it combines with ATP, and we get another molecule of UTP, that is UTP is regenerated. And why do we need to regenerate this UTP? So that it can activate again the next molecule of glucose. Okay. Now, we were talking about the primer for glycogenesis. What is this primer? It is normally just a fragment of glycogen. If the glycogen stores are depleted, then the protein glycogenin itself can act as a primer. The first glucose, it attaches at a specific tyrosine residue of glycogen. Okay. Now, coming to the branch formation. So, glycogen is a highly branched structure, and the branches have to be formed separately. Now, how does this branch formation take place? So the reactions so far, they led to the formation of a linear glucose chain linked by alpha-1,4-glycosidic bonds. The branch is linked by alpha-1,6-glycosidic bonds, hence a separate set of enzymes is required. Once the chain, which was previously formed, once it has a minimum of 10 glucosyl residues, minimum, then a branch formation takes place, and this is with the help of the enzyme, which is called a branching enzyme. And the new bond which is formed is an alpha-1,6-glycosidic bond. Now, how is this branch formed? This branch is formed with the help of a branching enzyme. And what is this branching enzyme? An alpha-1,4, alpha-1,6 transglycosylase. Now, the name of this enzyme might seem very complicated, but if you see in the next slide, if you understand what it is doing, it is actually very easy. So as for now, just remember branching enzyme. Now, what does the branching enzyme do? It transfers a part of the chain that is minimum 5 to 8 residues long to neighboring chain or part of the same chain and to establish a branch point. And the purpose of this reaction is that it increases the number of non-reducing ends, increasing the rate of synthesis and lysis. So more the number of branches, the more the number of glucose units we can store. So the glycogen stores will also be more, synthesis will be more, and the breakdown will also be more. Now let's look at this diagrammatic representation of what is happening. Now suppose here we have a glycogen molecule. So this is one part of the glycogen, one glucosyl chain. This is another glucosyl chain. All of these are glucose units. These are all glucose units and they are linked by alpha 1,4 glycosidic bonds. These are also alpha 1,4 glycosidic bonds. Only this part is one branch point which is linked by an alpha 1,6 bond. Now suppose until now this has been synthesized with the help of the enzyme glycogen synthase. Now when the chain has become minimum 10 residues long, what happens that the glucan transferase or the branching enzyme, it comes into action. Now what does this branching enzyme do? It cuts the alpha 1,4 glycosidic linkage. And where does it cut? It can cut anywhere, but the fragment which it removes will be 5 to 8 residues long. So it slices the alpha 1,4 glycosidic bond, it removes this unit, and what happens to the unit which was removed? It comes and joins somewhere else through the formation of a 1,6 glycosidic bond. So a new branch has been formed. So this new branch, it can be formed in the neighboring chain or it could also be formed in the same chain. It can be formed anywhere. Now, why do we call this enzyme branching enzyme, or another name is alpha 1,4 alpha 1,6 transglycolylase? Because here we are cutting an alpha 1,4 bond and we are forming an alpha 1,6 bond. So if we go through it again, so the branching enzyme, which is alpha 1 amylo 1 alpha 1,4 alpha 1,6 transglycosylase. So here we have the molecule which is minimum 10 residues long. So the branching enzyme or glucan transferase comes into action. It slices the alpha 1,4 glycosidic bond. This fragment, which is around 5 to 8 residues long, it is released and it goes and joins somewhere else through an alpha 1,6 bond, forming a new branch point. So in this way, with the help of the branching enzyme, numerous number of branches can be formed. Now this is what happens. It is a representation of total what was happening. So initially we had the glycogen primer, which is a fragment of a molecule. Glycogen synthase is acting and more glucose units are being added. Now once this chain is minimum 10 units long, then the branching enzyme comes into action. It slices this alpha 1,4 glycosidic bond and forms a new 1,6 glycosidic bond. So that's why it is called a glucan transferase or branching enzyme, but also alpha 1,4 alpha 1,6 transglycosylase. So this is why in the beginning I was stressing the importance of the bonds, because if you understand these bonds and what is there in the straight chain and what is there at the branch point, then this part becomes much easier. Now this is just a recap of what we did in glycogen synthesis. First we had the activation of glucose to UDP glucose, then addition of the glucose units to the glycogen primer. So the glucose comes from the UDP glucose and the glycogen primer, it is a glycogen fragment, and this process is called elongation. And finally, we had the branch formation through transferring fragments of glucosyl units to and forming a new alpha 1,6 glycosidic bond. Next, glycogenolysis. When you read these processes, try to read them continuously because you will understand what is the difference between glycogen synthesis and glycogenolysis. Now, glycogenolysis, it is degradation of glycogen to yield free glucose, as the name suggests. It is not a reverse of synthesis. A completely separate set of enzymes is required. And what are these enzymes? Glycogen phosphorylase, glucan transferase, and glucosidase. Okay. Now, glycogen phosphorylase, it is the main enzyme of glycogenolysis. It is a phosphotransferase, as we will see in the next slide. It sequentially degrades glycogen at the non-reducing ends till 4 glucosyl residues remain at each branch point. And this is very important, that it will act until 4 glucosyl residues remain at each branch point. Now, these intermediates which remain during glycogen breakdown are called limit dextrins. The cleavage occurs by phosphorylases, that is breakage of the covalent bond by adding a phosphate group, and glucose 1 phosphate is released. So as we will see in the next slide, that when glycogen is broken down, the glucose units which are released, they are not released in the form of free glucose, but in the formation of glucose 1 phosphate. So that is why we call it a phosphotransferase. Now this phosphorylase is specific for alpha 1,4 linkages. It cannot break the 1,6 linkage. Pyridoxal phosphate serves as the prosthetic group, and this is the rate limiting step. Now this is very important that glycogen phosphorylase is specific only for 1,4 linkages. So what does it mean? That it can hydrolyze only the straight chain, but it cannot break down the branch points. Now let's see what is happening. So here we have again a glycogen molecule. So this is one chain, this is a branch point, and this is another chain. So when we want to break it down, what happens? The enzyme which acts as glycogen phosphorylase. Now what does glycogen phosphorylase do? It comes and hydrolyzes this alpha 1,4 bond. So this glucose is released, the bond is broken down, and the glucose, it is released in the form of glucose 1 phosphate. Okay, it is not free glucose but glucose 1 phosphate. Again the enzyme will act, another 1,4 bond is lysed, another glucose is released in the form of glucose 1 phosphate. Okay, so this process will continue until there are 4 glucosyl residues left at a branch point. So though these bonds can also be hydrolyzed by glycogen phosphorylase, because these are 1,4 bonds, the glycogen phosphorylase only acts until 4 residues are left at a branch point. Okay. Next, what happens? Another glucan transferase, it comes into action. Now, this glucan transferase is alpha 1,4 glucan transferase. Now, what does it do? It removes outer 3 of the 4 left residues and transfers them to another chain. So what happens? That one alpha 1,4 bond is broken and another alpha 1,4 bond is made. Just see here again. The enzyme here is glucan transferase. So what does it do? From the previous, after the action of glycogen phosphorylase, what did we have? We had a fragment of 4 glucosyl residues left over here. So when this stage is reached, what happens? That glucan transferase, the enzyme comes in, it removes these 3 glucosyl units, it lyses the alpha 1,4 bond, and it transfers these 3 glucosyl units to a neighboring chain through the formation of a new alpha 1,4 bond. So that's why we also call it alpha 1,4 glucan transferase. Okay. So here we are breaking. So if we look at it again, the enzyme is alpha 1,4 glucan transferase. It removes outer 3 of the 4 residues and transfers them to a neighboring chain. So here we have these 3 residues. Enzyme is glucan transferase. The 1,4 bond is broken, and these 3 residues are then transferred to a neighboring chain through the formation of a new alpha 1,4 bond. So this is the action of glucan transferase. Next, what happens? That we had only one residue left at the branch point, and this was linked by an alpha 1,6 bond. So the last glucose residue is removed by alpha 1,6 glucosidase, releasing free glucose. So note here that when glycogen phosphorylase was acting, the glucose was released in the form of glucose 1 phosphate. But here, when glucosidase is acting, it is released in the form of free glucose. Now this glucan transferase and 1,6 glucosidase, they are 2 domains of a single polypeptide, which is known as the debranching enzyme. So what happens here? We had only one glucose unit left, which was linked by a 1,6 bond. 1,6 glucosidase comes into action. It hydrolyzes this bond, and this glucose is released. So in this way, the whole branch has been hydrolyzed. So simultaneously, the same enzymes will be acting again on different chains of glycogen and releasing the glucose molecules. So this is a recap of the whole of glycogenolysis. So if you understand it, actually it is very simple. The first enzyme which acts as glycogen phosphorylase, it will be lysing these 1,4 bonds and releasing the glucosyl units until a 3 glucosyl unit fragment is left over here. So once this 3 fragment is left, glucan transferase comes into action. It removes these 3 units and transfers it to the neighboring chain. So this is alpha 1,4 transglycosylase. This bond is broken and another bond is alpha 1,4 bond is formed here. And finally, we have 1,6-glucosidase, which hydrolyzes this bond, releasing this glucose unit. So together, these are also called the debranching enzyme. So when glycogen synthesis takes place, we have the branching enzyme, which leads to the formation of branches. And when we have glycogenolysis, we want to remove the branches, so we have debranching enzyme. Now, this is very important that at the end of glycogenolysis, around 90% of the glucose, it is released as glucose 1-phosphate. Only 10% is released as free glucose. And where does this 10% comes from? It comes from the branch point, the glucose which is released by the enzyme 1,6-glucosidase. Now, what is the fate of the glucosyl units which are released from glycogen? So, the glucose, free glucose, it is utilized as such. The glucose 1-phosphate which is released, it is converted by the enzyme phosphoglucomutase to glucose 6-phosphate. And we all know that glucose 6-phosphate, it is an intermediate of glycolysis. Now in the muscle, the glucose 6-phosphate enters glycolysis because in muscle does not contain the enzyme glucose 6-phosphatase. So the glucose, it goes into the other direction of glycolysis. Whereas in the liver, it can also, the liver contains glucose 6-phosphatase, so it can enter gluconeogenesis also, and glucose molecules can be produced directly to be released into the blood circulation. So in case of the muscle, the glucose is directly released the glucose is broken down, that is the glucose 6-phosphate which is formed, it directly enters the channel of glycolysis to form energy. Whereas in case of the liver glycogen, it is released as glucose molecules into the circulation. So that's why it helps to maintain the blood glucose levels. So the glucose 1-phosphate is converted to glucose 6-phosphate by phosphoglucomutase. Glucose 6-phosphate can enter glycolysis to yield energy in the muscle, whereas in the liver and kidney, it will be the liver here, not the kidney, because we are talking about glycogen. The glucose 6-phosphate, it is degraded by glucose 6-phosphatase, yielding free glucose, that is gluconeogenesis.